And let me welcome to the show somebody who has also picked up her mat and walked with it. I remember growing up, Camden was the butt end of many jokes about Jersey. Camden was a joke. Camden now is a beacon. Camden now is the blueprint. And this woman made it so. Let me welcome to the show the mayor of Camden, Mayor Dana Redd. Welcome.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for having me on your show this evening.
Well, listen, you kept coming up in these discussions about police reform and defunding police, and but before we get to what you did, talk to me about Camden before Dana Redd.
Well, Camden before Dana Redd, as you mentioned, was the symbol of everything wrong in urban America. And as you mentioned, we were often the headlines of everything that was not right in government. And when I declared my candidacy in 2009 that I would run for mayor, one of my statements was that I intended to make Camden the shining urban anchor in the state of New Jersey and in our nation. And it just goes to the power of words. And I'm a faith believer, and so I believe in speaking life over the city. And here we are today, and who would have ever thought that Camden would be looked at as a symbol of police and community standing in solidarity. And I'm very proud of our work here in Camden, but I'm very proud and very happy for the community.
Take us back to 2008 when you made a decision. What was going on at the time that you thought that you should step up into this space?
Certainly. So I was serving in the state Senate and, working to represent the 5th Legislative District, and in that space with great individuals like Senator Sandy Cunningham and Senator Teresa Ruiz. And we were working on the Budget and Appropriations Committee. And at that time, as newbies and freshmen to the Budget and Appropriations Committee, we were able to pass landmark legislation which appropriated $3.9 billion in school construction funding for our formerly known as Abbott districts. But, Camden has always been my heart and has always been my passion. And I grew up in Camden. I lost my parents when I was 8 years old to gun violence. And I remember my dad, who was a labor leader at Campbell Soup and someone who had ran for city council in 1963, but did not win at that time because of the establishment. I remember my dad saying that don't leave Camden because one day Camden was going to come back. And that's always been my driving force. My father has always been that person in my spirit that says, keep going, we got to do this, Dana. And so here I am and continuing his legacy. And so Camden was experiencing a fiscal deficit, a fiscal crisis, which led to us ultimately laying off our police force in 2011 when I took office in 2010. And so we were grappling with budget deficits and we were grappling with public safety. And in fact, 2012 was the year that we ended with 67 homicides, and that was the highest number of homicides in the history of the city of Camden.
Wow. I want to go back a second before we go forward, because you just glossed over, I lost both my parents to gun violence in Camden.
Yeah. So it was something that changed my life. I can tell you that at 8 years old. And I had a brother who was 16 months at the time. Our parents were killed. And, it just really it made me grow up very quickly. So my childhood sort of went out the door because I made a commitment to my father before he died. And he sort of saw what was coming down the road and had already prepared me that, Dana, I'm not going to be around too much longer. I need you to take care of your brother. You two stay together. Don't you get separated, and you be good for your mom and good for your grandparents.
Why did he know this, Mayor Redd? Why did he know? And you're 8.
Yeah. I was 8 years old, yeah. And, so he was involved politically. He was involved politically, and he was, pro-black, and he was advocating, believe it or not, for public safety back then, for workers' rights. He was representing minorities at Campbell Soup, and again, advocating for fairness and equality. And so, we're not going into greater detail, but they were tragically killed. It was billed as a murder-suicide, but I know in my heart that's not what happened.
So now you fast forward and you see a city under siege from poverty and police violence, crime, and you have a vision that you could turn this around in a short period of time. So what was the first thing you did? You swore in, you took the oath of office, you're mayor. What was the first thing that you were able to do that you think was the most significant in turning Camden around?
So I think the first thing that was important in my mind was restoring hope where there was despair, because Camden had so many false starts, and, residents were, disenchanted. They were like, oh, we've heard this song before. It never happened. But we had to get people to believe that we could do this if we all worked together to accomplish a shared vision, that we needed to come together in unity. We didn't all have to agree on how it got done, but we needed to agree on the very basic principle that Camden is worth fighting for. And so we set out, and I was very transparent with the community when we were grappling with our budget deficit. So I had a number of community meetings to explain so that they weren't hearing about, what was happening in their city by watching the evening news. I wanted them to hear it firsthand from the woman that they elected to serve and to lead their city. And so we met with the community. We explained our budget. We explained when we were on the precipice of laying folks off and why we were laying people off. And so while the community might have been a little anxious about it, I think they appreciated hearing it firsthand from me and from some of our council members what was happening. But although we laid off police officers in 2011, we never stopped looking for both a short-term and a long-term solution. The short-term solution was to partner with then Governor Chris Christie and with our elected officials in Washington, which was Senator Booker and Senator Menendez, to secure funding to rehire all of the officers that had been laid off. Because quite frankly, it was in the winter months, and so the only crime-fighting plan I had at that time was snow. And that was like a literal conversation that I had with some folks, like, listen, I need funds to rehire everyone. And so I think, making that appeal, we were able to accomplish that goal. But we also explored the long-term solution, understanding that crime has no borders and that crime is regional. And so a lot of, what we were experiencing in the city was as a result of individuals coming into our city to buy drugs. And we were able to prove that by working with our police chief, John Scott Thompson, and just looking at the tags that were in and out of the city. And so, again, it was a partnership of many individuals to help us to stand up a new police department.
But you didn't hire back everybody.
We did hire back everyone.
Okay. So, because I read somewhere that some cops did not like what you were doing in terms of change, and that you were able to weed out some bad apples as a result of the mass firing and then rehiring.
So there were two parts. So the short term was to rehire everyone. So we did rehire everyone. And as we were standing up the new department, because it took 2 years to create this new department. And so that didn't, it wasn't like a flip of a switch. We had to really transition and stand up the new department. But what we did was we invited all members to apply. So all members of the former department were invited to apply for the new Camden County Police Department. Some members elected not to apply because they had filed a lawsuit and they were banking on that lawsuit. Banking on the lawsuit being the reason why we would still be able to have the former department. And, we were able to prevail in court. And so here we have the Camden County Police Department that is helping us to provide for safety in the city. We have 50-year lows in crime across the board, and homicides are down 81%.
Hold on. So I'm still trying to understand what changed. If you're hiring back the same people, right? So it's called something different. What changed in the culture that led to the homicides being low, to there being a community feel that wasn't there before, the connection that you know didn't have prior to this? What changed?
Sure. We were able to hire more officers under the new police department that we were not able to hire under the former department. The other thing that changed was that we were able to relax the civil service rules and regulation in the first 2 years of the department, which allowed us to recruit and hire more minorities to work in the department. So, again, there were a lot of moving parts, and, we try to make this in simplistic terms and explanations of what happened, but I would say those were some of the things that were happening at the same time. And so Chief John Scott Thompson also instituted policing philosophies that maybe didn't previously exist with the former department. One was service before self, and the other was the preservation and sanctity of all human life. And so there was a different way in which public safety was conducted in the city. So it was more proactive guardians of our community and not warriors in our community. So one of the first directives that the chief gave to the new members and the former members of the prior department when we started out on day one in May of 2013 was to go into the neighborhoods that they would be assigned to. They were to knock on the doors of the residents and introduce themselves. And in introducing themselves, it's like, hi, I'm Detective Dana Red. I'm assigned to the Parkside neighborhood. I'm going to be here. Here's my business card. Here is my cell number. So call me if you see anything that you need my attention. And so that really began this whole philosophy and this whole approach of community policing.
Again, I think I'm missing something because Chief Thompson was the chief before. He's the same person, right?
Correct.
But now he's doing something different. Was this your edict? Or having you as his mayor now freed him to, because he's not a black man, not from the, he's not a black man from the community, sure. Right? But decided to institute something that seems to have made all of the difference. Connect those dots for me.
So I think, one, we had a shared vision that we wanted to have a police force that was more responsive to the community. And this was in response to what we heard in a number of our community meetings in terms of the officers that they wanted to see hired within the new department, the characteristics and the traits, because quite frankly, we actually conducted a focus group of community members as we were putting together the framework for a new Camden County Police Department. So community actually had input in terms of the hiring panels, right? Because we took the information from the focus group and made that a part of the interview process when we were hiring and staffing up for the new department. The other thing, although Scott Thompson is not a person of color, he is someone that had high likability in the community. And, I would see this with a number of the community engagement meetings that we had, that just how the community interacted with him. And I would also say that we didn't stand by ourselves, just elected and appointed officials. We stood with the community, we stood with the clergy, and we stood with business leaders that understood that public safety had to be the number one priority if we were ever going to get Camden back on her feet. And so it really was a collaborative effort, and not everyone agreed that this was the way to go, but it was the only decision at the time, and it was the best decision for Camden.
Drew McCaskill is here. 866-801-8255 is the number if you have any questions or comments for Mayor Red. Hey, Drew.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm lucky enough I get a chance to see you as well. But you talk about the making it a priority, the sanctity of human life, and it makes me think about the decisions that police officers in Atlanta made this weekend, where they could have made the decision not to shoot this man, right? And it makes me wonder how important it is to be intentional about the sanctity of human life, because if you don't build it into the intention, you're left with what we had happen here in Atlanta, I feel like. Talk to me about what the mindset of the new police force is around that, because that's not the mindset in every police force in major metropolitan cities, particularly ones who are coming off of, years of high crime.
Sure.
The community feels like the enemy in a lot of these places.
Absolutely. And, I watched what happened in Atlanta over the weekend and was gravely disturbed at what I saw. I think that the situation could have been handled differently. But again, not being there and not being an expert in policing, but just having a social conscience, right? And with all that we see playing out at our nation's level, on our nation and national platform, it was just tragic. It was awful. So I think that, it's important to build within the institution these philosophies that, the use of excessive force is the last resort, the very last resort. And, what we have done here in Camden under our police chief is we have seen the use of excessive force cases drop dramatically. We're also, starting to see that, and this was something that was a sticking point for Camden, where the clearing rates for homicides were very low. So we're seeing, that these clearing rates are trending in the right direction. But again, I think leadership comes from the top, very basically, right? Somebody has to set the tone and the tenor of a department, and it has to come not only from your elected officials, but it has to come from the chiefs that are leading departments, and it has to be intentional in holding people accountable. And so our department, holds our force very accountable for how they interact with the community. And if they get a complaint from the community, I can tell you that officer is going to get called in the office of their superior to discuss what has happened and possibly get reprimanded.
What did you put in place to make sure that the vision that you had as mayor continued, that is systemic? Because I think that's the issue. We have someone that's powerful and strong with a vision. You have the right, the right spirit. People follow and they walk in lockstep. You're gone. Mm-hmm. How do we continue this?
Well, it's a good question, and it was really something that I thought about before I transitioned out and declared that I wasn't going to seek another term. And I was concerned about sustaining our progress, right, and making sure that we continued the work that was underway. So with respect to the police department, and again, this was part of the construct as we were entering into agreements with the county to provide for our public safety services, was very intentional about incorporating the community component. And so we created this group called the Congress of Residents, Faith-Based and Community-Based Organizations, and we embedded this group that they are the bona fide group that the police should be interacting with, not only to facilitate training and police and community collaborations, but that they go to the group and make sure they listen to the voices of the residents and of our clergy, which are key stakeholders here in the city of Camden. So, and we built on that work under the President Barack Obama's administration. We were able to do some great things together.
So Frank Moran is the current mayor of Camden. Are you in contact with him? Does he consult with you?
Yes, he does. So I am in contact with Frank. Frank and I actually started out as young Democrats. Now we're just Dems. And and so we stay in contact and communication, and he will consult from time to time and ask me my advice. And most recently, he just reached out to me to chair the Camden Business Improvement District on behalf of the administration. So I'm looking forward to advancing that work.
And what's the future for you, Mayor Red?
Oh, bless you. So the future right now, I'm working for the Rowan University Rutgers Camden Board of Governors. So we are advancing the EDS and MEDS, our anchor institution strategy here in the city of Camden. The anchor institution strategy has given us our new identity from our industrial past, and a number of our anchor institutions are hiring our Camden residents. In fact, they are the largest employers of Camden residents. And so I'm still in the Camden space, still putting my imprint in this space and working with our residents, and I'm looking forward to some of the collaborative work we'll be doing in population and public health.
And some would argue the work that you're doing is going to sustain the legacy that you started, because you're furthering, the livelihoods of people in Camden so that they have a place to land.
Thank you so much. That's my intention. Amen. Thank you.
Drew?
I know that one of the things that you said that I don't want us to sort of gloss over is that when you made some of the highest impacts in Camden, you had to do it in partnership with a very, very Republican governor. And can you talk a little bit just about working with what you have to get what you need done?
That's great.
Absolutely. I mean, as the mayor of Camden, we had very limited resources in the city, and our resources and budget, as I mentioned, was very tight. And not being able to do some of the things that residents wanted, residents deserved, and residents expected. And so I had to form partnerships at all levels of government, partnerships with, as you mentioned, a Republican governor who, quite frankly, ended up being one of the best governors for and to Camden. And we agreed that while our political philosophies may be very different in terms of our political parties, but we were able to put those philosophies to the side and put the interests of people first. Addressing public safety was important. It was about people. It was about preserving lives. It was about reducing homicides and reducing gun violence and shootings. And so his administration worked very closely with my administration, as did the county of Camden. And so Camden is the county seat here in Camden County, and we are one among 37 municipalities. And the county of Camden has worked with the city to advance park rehabilitation and park development throughout the city, which gives spaces for children and families to come together and to play safely.
And just to put a finer point on it, it doesn't really matter who's sitting in that governor's mansion or even in the White House if you have the dexterity, which you apparently did, to make people do the things that you need them to do. Right?
So I will. Right. I'll limit that to New Jersey right now. But yeah, I mean, you got to be able to. You got to be able to, to build consensus, to bring resources back to your community, and to do it in a way that is about collaboration. It's about public-private partnerships. And I knew that we could not operate and survive if we had existed as a silo. So we had to come out of our silo, and we had to build partnerships in order to advance the agenda to rebuild our great city.
I'm going to throw something out since I have two very, very brilliant people in the room. I actually think that I'm going to say this out loud, so y'all can come for me if you want to. I think we're in a unique period right now where while we may have an actual Klansman in the White House, that he doesn't want to go down in history as an actual Klansman. And we saw this with criminal justice reform, where, this person is going to try to stack up leading into November, particularly with black people, because that's where he's, look at the unemployment, look at what I've done. If there is somebody, not Candace Owen, not Ben Carson, but somebody that can deliver a message that these are the things that we need to get done, we're still not going to vote for him. Let's just have a family meeting right now. We never vote for him. However, if we can get some things done, do you see that there might be an opportunity, Dana Red?
Well, I would like to think that there's an opportunity, but, by all accounts, what I'm seeing on national TV, I'm just disturbed, from the way the peaceful protest was handled in Washington, D.C., was reminiscent of looking at the history books from the times that we had marches under Dr. Martin Luther King for civil rights and social justice, and how those individuals were tear gassed, were watered down with fire hoses and dogs that were turned on those individuals. And so I was really, I have to say, very disturbed by how that whole situation was handled, and that was unnecessary. So, I'm a Democrat, as I mentioned, and so I don't know that he is open to listening to reasonable solutions to dealing with systemic problems that have plagued our nation. And so I'm hopeful that, those that are in this movement, those that are protesting across the nation, that translates into action. And so we don't need to lose the momentum, and we certainly don't need to forget how George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, how they lost their lives during this period of time in our nation's history. It is really unfortunate that we are having this conversation, but I hope that folks are enlightened and that they have their eyes wide open and that they vote for the person that will best represent our interests in our nation's highest office.